Wide to row to center. Lundvik shoots. He scores! Johnny Lundvik does it again!
Jarvis in close shot. There's a goal. Seth Jarvis, the 17-year-old, short side, glove side, high, just under the crossbar.
Cutting to the front of the net, and they score. Reese Newkirk along the right wing just took the pass. That was phenomenal patience from Seth Jarvis and the Winterhawks.
Hey, this is Reese Newkirk, and you're listening to the Pucklandia podcast.
Welcome into Pucklandia. Pleased to have you as the listener along for the ride. I believe this is the 9th season. So, in podcast years, that's a long time. And one of the main reasons that this show kept going for a number of years here is my friend Josh Critzer, who writes for PNW Hockey Talk and runs the show over there. Well, first off, how's your summer, Josh?
Hey, Chad, it's good to be on again. Appreciate it. I remember when I first moved out here, one of the first things I did, I had to find hockey, and I found the Winterhawks, and naturally you have to find podcasts, and I found the Pucklandia podcast. So, it comes full circle sometimes. And, but overall, summer was great. It went by really fast, but also not fast enough sometimes. It's crazy that we're already a couple games into the hockey season, but it's been I'm probably feeling the best physically and maybe mentally as well that I've been in a while, which I always appreciate people who reach out and things after you kind of bring light to some of those things when I'm on the podcast with you. So I do appreciate people who reach out and checking in, make sure everything's okay. So the last couple times have kind of been, oh boy, kind of doom and gloom sometimes, but I'm pleased to say my eyes are functioning as well as they probably are, getting used to my new normal from that standpoint. But it was nice to be back in the rink for training camp, for the practices, for the games. I was not able to get up and see any of the preseason, and then was out of town last weekend to catch the games live, but was able to kind of watch a couple of the replays, go back and do some kind of studying on the video and things like that. And then I was also at practice this afternoon as we record here on a Thursday evening. But it's just great to have hockey back, Chad.
Yeah, and I really appreciate bringing you along. You're always again in the rink, on a Thursday afternoon, which is a nice touch. A lot of guys don't have the time or drive or whatever to get out and do that, myself included. And so that's kind of, and I know you have your ear to the beat and have developed, relationships with, the coaching staff and whatnot. And that's always really handy as far as, having some insight and bringing it to the listeners of this show, and always appreciate that. And so, yeah, personally, I was in the rink for most of Neely Cup, and then I kind of haven't been able to catch much since then, doing other things, including I missed the broadcast of both games over the weekend. So, but at the same time, they had a lot of guys away at camp. The first two games aren't really indicative of what this roster is going to look like here moving forward. Was it? Yeah,
definitely not. There was to start both games. I think they had 5 defensemen, which is problematic, and they were rotating. Nick Johnson and Kyle Chazowski each took a couple shifts along the blue line there as well. So, yeah, when you have 3 or 4 guys that are 4 guys for the first game, in Southern, Thompson, Cagnoni, and Ulsher gone at pro camps, that really thins out your blue line. Leaves just 2 guys who had basically WHL experience last year, and Brett Ravendal, who kind of started to see some minutes towards the end of the season, but was kind of in and out of the lineup. And then Josh Morey, who has kind of been a utility player for the Winterhawks and kind of will look to be more kind of solidify his spot on the blue line as opposed to kind of going back and forth between forward and defense. But so they had several guys out of the lineup. They did have the majority of their top 6, if you will, or top 7, depending upon how you view Diego Battazzoni, who my goodness, that's somebody we want to talk about on this episode for sure. But the only forward they were missing was Josh Davies, who is away at Florida Panthers pro camp, who's back now. Everyone is back and accounted for at practice today. There's still kind of the three main injuries up front, and McDonough, Miller, and Aiden Sotis. No change on the timeline for those guys, although Miller was in a no-contact jersey, which is good to see him out on the ice after him not being on the ice hardly at all outside of some individual drills at training camp. So he's at least out there in some of the drills, but in a no-contact sweater, he's no closer to returning. We're still looking probably around a November timeline for him. But yeah, in terms of the lineup, there was a lot of, different combinations that you'll see. Johnson had to kind of mix and match his forwards a little bit, especially the power play units where you had 5 forwards on the first unit. When they were trying to tie up the game, I think at one point they had 6 forwards out there. So I think those are all going to change. Luca Cagnone's, I have a feeling will probably play minute and a half, minute 45 of the power play. He's just going to be that power play quarterback, so that'll be a big adjustment from the power play that you saw over those 2 games last weekend. And obviously no Jan Spunar for both those games. So when you factor in kind of your rear guard of 7 players, you were missing 5 of the 7. So it's hard to take a lot of the defensive zone coverage and some of that stuff for what it is in those early games. But there's a lot of roster turnover that's going to happen. Some young guys getting their first taste in the league. So there's just. It's early games, but at the same time, these points in September count just as much as the points in March do. So when, kind of feel like they left at least 1 point on the table in Wenatchee, probably would have liked to get 2 in that game when you're up 4-1. But, at the same time, those are learning experiences, learning opportunities for those players. But those points, they matter just as much. But Winterhawks go into weekend number 2 with a 1-1 record.
One thing about these shows is I don't really keep any sort of format, and we wander, and that's how we converse in real life, and that's kind of how we do it here and recorded for them. But so I'm gonna go off on a tangent. But you talk about Wenatchee, and obviously their on-ice product is likely to change here coming up. I mean, there's, the league's kind of had a rough start here with, different varying scandals and, with coaching in Lethbridge, Everett, and Wenatchee. And, every time something pops up, I think about, the long tenure of Mike Johnston here in town. And even the 2 years he was away, it was essentially like, he was kind of, it was still his system. It was still his concept. It wasn't like they started over or anything like that. And even back to it's been 10 years since he had his own scandal, which is a little bit completely different, in relation to what these other guys are going through right now. And it's it's certainly nice as a fan of this hockey club to think about the stability and the hands that these kids are in, that as far as overseeing the development of young men, who most of which will go on to things besides hockey. Well, all of them will eventually, but it's a nice world to live in when you still have MJ running your hockey club in comparison to some of the other things going around in the league. And it's just that's something I've been thinking about a lot to start the season.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that there's still some of this, let's just call it what it is, inappropriate behavior that's happening, and it's not been a good look for the league. You don't want to lump it into those controversies, but you also have Alex Edwards in Victoria, who gets a 25-game suspension, which I think is one of the longest suspensions in a long time for an on-ice incident of against what happened in that Everett game. So just the league last year, I think, was riding a PR high with Bedard and what was able to be done there, and World Juniors and hosting the Memorial Cup. There was just a lot of good press for them last year. There's going to be things that pop up, but you're right. There's not a lot to kind of positives to hang your hat on right now from a league perspective. So you hope that can kind of get cleaned up, but at the same time, these things got to get called out, and there's got to be a change in hockey. And just the way that how we talk to each other as humans is very divisive, and you don't want to see that in any capacity, let alone in hockey, and especially with these young men. And some of these people are looked up to from kids, from fans, from you name it, the players, and you want these people to be beyond reproach. And unfortunately, we're not seeing that right now. So hopefully, this can be the start of some change. But at the same time, you kind of need more proof before you're going to see that where we've maybe turned a corner. But at the same time, here we are.
Yeah, and me personally, I mean, I have strong opinions. That's how I ended up starting a show like this. But I also don't want to, beat anybody up as far as, whoever's running the, I tend to know who's running the Twitter accounts for these various teams and whatnot. And I'm not trying to shoot the messenger there. And I also, try to maintain positive relationships just for the, this show and WHL Unfiltered. And so I try to, it's not so much that I'll, bite my tongue in exchange for access, but, if I, really want to, pick on the Everett Silvertips for whatever they're going through, and that's one I know the least about as far as scandal, like, then when I go to find guests, for, through their team, then I get that would handcuff me there. So it's like, it's tricky for me, and, I think most people know it's, and I try to keep hockey separate than, world events and current events and things like that. But at the same time, I think people, I do show my colors a little bit that, I'm a hockey is for everyone guy and that kind of a thing. Because, I mean, do we want to grow the game or do we not want to grow the game? And, do we want hockey to be, stale, or do we want it to evolve? And so that's kind of where I'm at. But yeah, mostly I wanted to come back to just pumping the tires of the staff here in Portland, and I mean it's nice to not have to worry about is there something going to come out from this staff, because I mean they've two of the guys have been assistants in this league for 20 years, most of which here, and then and then MJ leading the way, and so it's I think sometimes as fans, it's easy to take it for granted, or maybe frustrated with the lack of playoff success over the recent years, or whatever. But it's maybe take a second to think about what we have here, being able to root for this particular franchise and the stability that is offered.
Yeah, it's one of those where you just hope that everything is on the up and up. And sometimes you don't know. So, for right now and everything that's going on, you just hope that there isn't more of this in the league. But if there is, you hope it can be resolved in a way that provides a safe environment for everybody involved. But regardless of who it is, who you are, what you believe, that it's a safe environment for everyone that's involved in a sport you and I both love so much.
Well, and I mentioned, the lack of playoff success, and that's something I wanted to touch into, that, we've been frustrated the last couple springs, with, not being able to make as much hay as one wants. And, last year it was a kind of a tough poker match, with, a likely matchup with Seattle and or Kamloops, and that Kamloops one definitely didn't go the way we wanted. But, I think for the most part, most of us looked at this year as the target year, as the peak of the cycle, specifically with that back end and having 4 19s, on the defense core, which should bode pretty well. I mean, what do you let's start with that there, Josh. I mean, what do you expect from this defense core and that group of 19s that's pretty highly regarded?
Yeah, for years it's been talked about. We've got an inexperienced defense group. We've got 4 17-year-old defensemen and, one 18-year-old defenseman, and then last year it's the 18-year-olds, and now they're kind of they're the veterans back there. So this is kind of all some of those pain points that have been the past couple of years. You're hoping that this is the turn of, and makes kind of all of those instances where you kind of were hoping for a little bit more in the defensive zone. You hope that some of that is kind of, you're getting paid off now, let's just say. And, Luca Cagnoni is a very, very, very talented offensive defenseman, and he's going to probably play close to 30 minutes a night would be my guess. And that he, especially on the power play, especially in the offensive zone. And I've kind of, when I've been talking with people or doing talking with other markets and different things on what they can expect out of Portland, it's kind of what I keep going back to is, where does Portland play the majority of the time? And you think it would be as simple as, the more in the offensive zone you are, the better off they're going to be. But I really think that's the case with Portland. They have these such gifted offensive defensemen, and their best defense might be their offensive ability. But where we saw Portland run into trouble the past couple of years is when teams with a heavy forecheck, like Kamloops in Seattle, and to a certain extent, kind of some of those other kind of heavier teams, it can give Portland fits, and they can get hemmed in their own zone a little bit. And then that's when you start to see the defensive, let's just call them opportunities for improvement, if you will, kind of start to rear their head a little bit. So if those defensemen are able to keep their shift short, get the puck out of the zone, clean zone exits, hit the forwards in stride, keep the transition game going that Winterhawks fans are so used to seeing, if they can just get out of their zone and spend as little time there as possible, I think they're in for a strong season. Mark Elscher, I talked with him a little bit today, since this was kind of the first time. He's only been back in Portland for a couple of days. He missed training camp with visa issues, and then went and reported right to Florida's rookie camp and training camp, and got into a preseason game earlier this week. So he's still kind of getting accumulated. I can't say that word, but he's still trying to kind of get his feet underneath him. But one of the things he talked about today was just how he wants to be more reliable in his defensive zone, kind of get back to that 17-year-old version. He felt that he kind of maybe took not necessarily a step back last year, but didn't quite keep developing in his own zone as much as he would have liked. So, that's one of the things that he said he focused on. But you hope that guys like Sutherland can start to, we started to see a little bit of a mean streak from him towards the end of the year last year, and he's got all the size that you'd want in a defenseman. We kind of hope that will start to come out a little bit. Ryder Thompson got a look with Arizona. Good for him to kind of get some of that recognition. He's probably the least flashy of the four guys who got a look at pro camps, but he's stable. You know exactly what you're going to get out of Ryder. He's going to be strong in his own zone. He's going to make the first pass when he needs to. He can jump up into the rush. He's probably not going to put up 50 points, 60 points like some of the other defensemen might be able to, but he's the kind of defenseman you need on a deep program, and a guy who is a kind of a team guy through and through, and a guy that a lot of the young guys are looking up to. So each guy kind of brings their own unique style and flair to the game, and if they can kind of figure some of that stuff out, if they can, how much time do they have their back or their to the back of the net, that we've seen kind of in tight coverage issues over the past couple of seasons, and teams, especially Kamloops last year in the playoffs, were able to exploit that, even to a certain extent. Everett in that series, you saw Berezowski and Roost really kind of control behind the net and then making passes out front. So how they handle all that, I think, is going to be a real telling sign for how well the Winterhawks do this season.
And I don't want to compare the on-ice game of these two players, but, and maybe I'm a little blinded, with my rose garden colored glasses, but, I feel like Cagnoni could be the kind of guy that we talk about, around the league like we did Olin Zellweger last year, as far as, the kind of defenseman that, really takes over games, makes you, notice when he's on the ice. The other teams have to have a plan for him. I mean, what's your gut feeling on that? I mean, it seems like, Cagnoni could be, really one of the elite defensemen in the Western Conference, maybe the whole league this year. I mean, that's kind of my starting point. But how realistic do you think that is?
I think they're similar players in their offensive ability. I think Luca's got a little flair for the dramatic to him. It's fun to see his personality start to come out. Fans will notice he uses a white stick. I'm still trying to get to the bottom of that story, so that's something I hope to uncover here in the next couple of weeks as to why he chose that. One of the things I've been told before in the locker room area is look good, play good. So I don't know if that's the situation we got going on with the white stick, but Luca is definitely going to bring fans out of their seats. We've seen him, come in on a breakaway and take slap shots. We've seen him not be afraid to end up behind the net off the rush. Zellweger was known for that, being just kind of all over the place and just kind of having free roam. And I would imagine that Cagnoni's going to have kind of the same freedoms that Zellweger was afforded, especially knowing how much Johnson likes to have an active defense. Where I think Luca's a little bit further behind is the defensive side of the puck, where I think Zellweger was maybe a little bit of a step ahead of where Luca is at this stage. But Luca is absolutely a driver for Portland. I think as he goes, I think the team goes. He's definitely an X factor. He's the kind of guy who's, like you said, is going to disrupt plays. And, one of the things that makes Luca so good is what he can do with his stick. And that white stick that he's using is he's not going to just lay the body. We're probably not going to see him on the top 10 hits at the end of the season or anything like that. But he's just smart with his positioning, and you're seeing it in the transition of the NHL right now. Of kind of gone are the days of the Adam Foots of the world, where they're just kind of big mean guys in the back end, and you're starting to see some of these, to kind of keep it in the not necessarily the Portland, but at least the WHL, like you're seeing with Jared Spurgeon with the Minnesota Wild, who just not the biggest guy, but just really smart with his stick, always has it in the right position. And I think for Cagnoni, I think that's an area of his game you're probably gonna want to see improve. And if you're San Jose, just seeing through what some of their beat reporters and stuff were saying of just how talented this guy is offensively, and if he can start to figure it out a little bit more in the defensive zone, he's going to have more opportunities. So, and that's not uncommon for these really talented offensive defensemen. He's probably going to do really well in junior, but as he tries to make that jump to that next level, he's going to have to kind of pick it up in the defensive zone. But at the same time, if you get 80, 90 points from him or more, you're willing to take some of those kind of deficiencies in other areas, because he is going to make up for it so much on the offensive end.
Yeah, you mentioned Spurgeon. That was I know that was before you were following this league, but man, he was really fun to watch when he was in Spokane. That was they had a number of good defensemen. They had Cowan before that. I mean, it was they had a pretty good factory going there, and a Memorial Cup to show for it. But it was and it's a side note. I mean, that's kind of what we do, right? We talked about it. But when I was in the rink here, a couple weeks ago, and I was doing the math on these kids' age, as far as a lot of us feel old. I mean, we're older every year. I mean, by definition, but I am of the age where I've been following this league long enough that half of these kids weren't born yet, and half of them were when I started following this league. So,
okay, yeah. Here
in a couple of years, I will be my fandom of the WHL will be older than the kids in the WHL. So that'll be a sad day. But I'm hanging on for about 2 more years, I think. But.
There you go. Yeah, that was like for me last year of the number of years that I've officially kind of been a credentialed media member, as that was kind of last year was my overage season. So this year I kind of feel like I'm starting all over again. I started as my first season was, I think, the rookie season for From Delorme and Januzzi and Jack O'Brien and James Stefan were these highly touted U.S. prospects that were coming out of Michigan that no one was really familiar with, and so like this is kind of like for me, that was kind of what hit home too of, oh my gosh, like I've seen a full cycle of junior hockey now of, okay, especially when you factor in this year of guys who were listed or signed or drafted who've now been, with the organization for the 5 years and 6 years, when you factor in their 15-year-old season too. But yeah, it's a little crazy. And, as the ages of the players stay the same, but we keep getting older, right? So you keep getting further and further away from connecting with the players. And, just listening today to overhearing some of the conversations and the lingo, and I'm like, I don't understand half of the words these kids are saying and the order in which they're saying them in. And, apparently one of the big words nowadays is the word bet, which I think means like, okay, or yes, I guess. But the number of times I heard, okay, bet this afternoon, I was like, I don't know what they're betting on. And then was told that, oh no, that they're just saying yes and agreeing. And it's like, okay. I'm sure even the older fans than us are probably, laughing at this statement as well. But you're just going to have that as you get older, and the youth finds a new way to kind of remind you of that.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. And that particular term too was big in mid '80s hip hop. So I kind of had a hunch as to what that worked out, because that's a area outside hockey that I also live in. But
sure, see, and that just shows where I fall in the spectrum of, I didn't know that was big in the '80s, but now it's big now. So I missed it I spent 6 months in the '80s, and most of that was crying and, in diapers. So I missed some of that, and then I'm missing it on the front end here. And it took me a couple of years to learn what Snapchat actually was. And now there's like the WhatsApp, and there's all these other apps that these guys are using. And I'm like, do you all still have a cell phone I can call you on? That's my world a little bit. So, yeah.
Yeah. Old man shakes finger at cloud.
Yeah. Something like that. Right.
Yeah. So, we talk about the forward or the defenseman, and that's really, obviously the key to any hockey team, and especially an attacking one like the offense that Portland has traditionally ran, and that we've talked about the forward group a little bit too. But let's talk about the new hotness in this kid that they brought up from Swift Current. And I know, I don't know how much you want to get, behind the curtain, but right, like immediately when he walked into town here, and immediately, in training camp, first session on the ice, he made his presence known that he's here for serious business, didn't he?
He is, and I appreciate you lobbing that softball for me. I'll try and make good solid contact here, but first day of practice, first shift, he gets out there, and I was there for before all Neely Cup games, and you just hear him, and he's yelling at guys, talk out there, keep your head up, just yelling at guys of just, hey, and he was out there laying the body, and I think he kind of got word of maybe dial it back a little bit on day one of camp with some of these guys, but he seems like a player who maybe, you're probably a little more connected to Swift Current with some of your connections there and with Sean, but Davies is a guy who I think wasn't used how he would have ideally liked to have been used. Maybe got stuck behind some number games in Swift Current a little bit, but the guy can shoot a puck. I'll tell you that. We saw a couple of highlights with him when he was in Florida at their rookie camp and pro camp a little bit. But at Neely Cup, he was lighting the lamp pretty good. I was watching him take some one-timers this afternoon. I think you're going to see him probably on the flank on the power play, maybe a little bit of the front of the net as well. I think there's some options there on what they're going to do with him. But Davies is, he's a well-built. He's a 19-year-old. He's a 2004 birthday, just right around 200 pounds. But he's just solidly built. He's just muscle. He's kind of a tank. I heard when they were doing fitness testing, when he was doing the jump, where they jump as high as they can and try and see how high on the wall or the little flags that they can knock over. After his first jump, like the room stopped and everyone had to watch him again. When he got on the bench, he was kind of maxing out, and guys were like, he was like, you want me to keep going, or like, where do I stop here? So this is the type of player who I think by the second or third home game, probably by the end of next weekend, he's probably going to be a fan favorite. He's going to wear 71, same as Cross Hannes, but two very, very different players. Davies was kind of the baggage, if you will, that comes with Davies is penalties. And he's the third most penalized player in the Western Hockey League last year, and he brings an edge. And that's to be expected. There's going to be penalties. There's going to be maybe a suspension or two that happened in there. But one of the things we've been saying for the past couple of years is Portland has struggled with being overly physical up front or not physical enough up front, and they've been too easy to play against. And they can get pushed around in the front of the net a little bit, and they've kind of got those what other people would maybe classify as undersized forwards. Davies kind of breaks that trend a little bit, and he's not going to be afraid to mix it up. He'll probably have a couple of fights. Wouldn't surprise me there. The trick for him will be balancing and finding that line, and how can he avoid crossing that too much. But you also don't want to take away that edge either. Like, that's one of the things I've been telling fans as I've been interacting with them throughout preseason, is part of what makes Davies successful is that competitiveness and that aggression. And so you want to hone that in, but you also don't want to limit him. And one of the things when I talked with Davies at training camp was he feels that he wasn't given the chance to show off some of what he can do offensively, that he was just kind of penciled in as kind of this third line checker and kind of an energy guy. And there's more to that, and I've seen that firsthand, just watching him shoot the puck these past couple of weeks when I've seen him. I think fans are really going to like what they see out of the new 71.
I almost wonder if, again, I haven't spoke with the man, but I kind of wonder if it was he almost has too much personality for a place like Swift Current, whereas
sure,
in Portland maybe you can kind of let your freak flag fly a little bit, and and I like what you're saying about that edgy side to his game. I mean, there's a long tradition of forwards that play on the edge here in town, and some of which are controversial, but your Brad Rosses and your Leipzigs and your Shane Bournes and these type of players, and so you love the on ice product from guys like that, and sometimes sometimes it goes too far, but that's a risk you want to run, and what's Jeff Merrick always say, that you want to. You'd rather tame a tiger than paint stripes on a kitty cat, kind of a thing, yep. Right? And so,
yep.
But I still have a T-shirt in my closet with Brad Ross, Taylor Jordan, and Riley Boychuk, and it's Hockey's Most Wanted. It was made up like a wanted poster, because we had guys that kept getting suspended all the time.
Yeah,
and so. But it was an interesting, a very transitional period for Winterhouse hockey, is the early part of MJ's tenure here. But I digress. But I mean, it's kind of I don't mind a guy with a little edge to his game, and if he wants to put the puck in the net and be a physical specimen, I mean, what more do you want? If it's a game of entertainment, I mean, that's kind of checking all the boxes for a guy like myself.
Yeah, and and talking with Josh, and talking with a couple of the scouts, and talking with a couple of the hockey operations guys, and just kind of getting a feel for, and even a couple of the NHL scouts that I know that come through here, just kind of, hey, what do you see in this guy? What do you kind of expect? What do you think he projects in Portland? And we saw it in the clip that I had tweeted out, and it had made a couple of the highlights in Neely Cup. The kid's fast. Like, that back check he had on that penalty shot in some August day, and in the middle of the first day at training camp, you're like, okay, this guy's got a compete level, and you can see those NHL style habits. But kind of the numbers that I was given was, last year he scored 20 goals. They think they could easily get 30 plus out of him, and that there's likely a chance that when you factor in Nguyen, when you factor in Stefan, Clausen, who's put up 30 goals plus regularly, there's a chance Portland could have 3 or 4, maybe 5 guys that score 30 goals, which gives a different definition of scoring by committee because they'll have more guys scoring more goals, right? Like last year it was scoring by committee, but they weren't scoring a ton. And I think so for Davies, it's, his career high in points, I think, is 36, if I remember right, which was 2 years ago. But a career high in goals of 20 last year without, I can't remember how many power play goals. It was like 5 or 6 of those as well. So I would imagine he's going to see some time on both the power play and the penalty kill. We can talk a little bit about the penalty kill, and Mike Johnson's going to have a little different approach here the first month or two that we can get into. But, 75 points for Davies I don't think is out of the question. If he can stay healthy, if he can avoid suspension, can he take 130 penalty minutes and bring it to 100? And can you take 20 goals, turn it into 30, 35? I think his number that he set for himself was 30. A lot of players, when you ask them for personal goals, it's we want to help the team, we want to go far in playoffs, we want to win the Memorial Cup, and he said all those right things, but he also knows he's trying to get a pro contract, and he's a 6th-round pick of the Panthers, and he wants to earn a contract. He's seen other guys in his draft class and Ulster and guys who are getting their contracts, and you start to go, okay, this is kind of a make or break it season, and what better guy do you want to try and tap some maybe unrealized offensive potential than Mike Johnson? We know what he is as a coach. We know what he is as a developer, and he unlocks potential in these guys that you just didn't expect or you didn't think would take a step. And I'll tell you, Davies is going to be a fun player for Portland fans to watch this year. And, he's not the storyline, but he's definitely going to be one of them.
Well, and that's definitely the first thing I heard from Swift Current after that trade was that he could, should really thrive in this system with this coaching, with this kind of offense, and should be a really good fit for him, which would lead you to believe that maybe not as much, in Swift Current, but
yep. And I think what's going to help, what Davies is going to do is he's got this leadership presence, and when he talks, the room listens from what I've seen so far. Obviously I'm not in that locker room, but around the locker room area, just what I can hear on the ice at practice and different things like that, of he's going to push guys. And I think a guy like Luke Shelter is going to be a player who can maybe really benefit from that. Maybe Nicholas Johnson to a certain extent as well. Kind of bigger body guys, got some size to them, can maybe not skate as well as Davies can, but Shelter and Johnson got to see what type of player and what kind of career you can make out of it with what they saw Robbie Fromm Delorme do last year. And now you got Josh Davies as another example, and maybe are those, can Davies unlock a little bit more out of Shelter and Johnson? We're already seeing Johnson pot 2 goals this weekend, or this past weekend, which is, he said was a sigh of relief. And, I think he had 3 all of last year. So to have 2 after the first weekend was, for him was, he said just gave him a lot of confidence. He took was able to benefit from a lot of playing time in the preseason and just kind of kept that going. And but for him to see the puck on the back of the net a couple times is helpful. And you start to wonder how much of that can Davies rub off on some of these other guys in a positive way.
Well, and, Davies' next regular season game will be his 150th. And so,
yep.
And especially considering one of those years was the short season, I mean, that's, a pretty stout, amount of experience in a league like ours. And you take an outsized personality and put it together with some experience and some age, so some off-ice experience too. I mean, that's that's a pretty nice piece of leadership that you can apply, like you've mentioned, towards some of the guys that could potentially benefit from from riding along on that kind of train.
Yeah, and Davies is he's a certain type of player, and it's a player that Portland has been missing, but he also fits enough of what Portland's doing that it's not this crazy pivot where they're bringing in I don't want to compare him to Ryan Reeves because of to try and look at an NHL, but Ryan Reeves is a one-trick pony. He's not the most talented offensively. He's not the fastest skater. He's out there to have a physical presence to kind of keep guys honest, but he's going to play 7, 8 to maybe 10 minutes a night. He's not going to be on the ice much. Davies is the opposite of that. He's still going to have guys checking their shoulder, not going to want to take liberties, but he's also can beat you too. Like, we've seen his speed, we've seen his shot, we've seen a small glimpse of, I think, of what his playmaking ability is, but that's going to be an X factor for Portland of having a kind of guy who can still fit Johnson's system, not take them out of the style they want to play, but just bring that little bit extra oomph that they maybe been missing in the past 4 or 5 years. Reese Newkirk was kind of that pest a little bit, if you will, but he was known to take some penalties, but a lot of those were kind of the 10-minute misconduct types where the guy had a mouth on him, so let's just leave it at that. He was known to, shout out to Keith Dwiggins, who's one of the team photographers. Who just takes, if you ever need good photos, just go look at any of Keith's work. Keith just does some tremendous things, but Keith used to take photos from the bench years ago when Newkirk was out there, and just him and I, some of the stories we've exchanged over the years of things that Newkirk has said just kind of makes you laugh, and Davies has got a little bit of that side to him where he's going to kind of give you the sideways smile and kind of chirp you a little bit, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that, especially if he can keep it, whistle to whistle, or kind of the right time type of thing. I think this is a good, I don't want to call it a problem to have if you got a guy who's overly physical like that, but it's something that they've desperately been missing, and not another guy on the roster who can play that type of role.
Pasternak with better hands. I mean, in a way, that was a thing I really, was disappointed when Pasternak had moved on and had opportunities, back east. But you need. I mean, the game's always changing and evolving, and obviously it's the most speed and skill we've ever seen. But it's still a contact sport with a weapon that you still need. You still need grit. You still need hockey violence at times.
Yep. Yeah, and if we're kind of sticking with the forwards and not beating the Davies horse to death, but I think that's one of the players that there isn't a lot of turnover from this year's roster versus last year, right? You lose From Delorme and you lose Januzzi. To an extent, you could call losing Chaz Lucius, but you don't lose Chaz Lucius. He played 6 games for you. You lose Litke off the playoff roster, but for the most part, and then you've got Ryan McCleary, who was kind of the centerpiece of the Davies trade, going back to Swift Current. But for the most part, you're not turning over a ton of the roster. So what you're looking at is less competition for spots, especially up front, with 3 overagers taking up of 3 of your top 6. But then you're at the 19-year-old seasons of Marcus Nguyen and also Kyle Chizowski. So those are going to be kind of other 2 factors for Portland, especially kind of in that middle 6, top 6, however you want to kind of how you slot these guys in and out. Those guys are, Chizowski was injured a little bit last year, so you hope he can stay healthy. Portland really missed his energy and his leadership. One of the guys who talks easily the most on the bench and in the locker room, kind of a rah-rah guy. A lot of guys gravitate towards him. Last year's leadership group was 20 and 19-year-olds, and then you had Chizowski as an 18-year-old get a letter, which I think has been a while for Portland for a non-drafted 18 to be wearing a letter. Our friend Andy Kemper can probably have a little bit more insight into the last guy who did that. But Chizowski into his 19-year-old year, Marcus Nguyen with who's got speed to burn. What I'm looking for out of Nguyen especially is how many goals can he generate this year that aren't off the rush. He's kind of how I've seen him a little bit, which is impressive for an 11th round pick to have back-to-back 20-goal seasons. You got to give a lot of credit to Newen and his work ethic and what he's been able to kind of carve for himself. But I kind of compare him a little bit to Evan Weinger from years ago. That I don't have as long of a history with the Winterhawks as you do to maybe compare, but Evan Weinger just had speed to burn, but he didn't have the finishing ability. And if he wasn't getting chances off the rush, you kind of sometimes forgot he was out there. And that's not necessarily the case with Newen that we've seen so far. He's gonna have a bigger role in the penalty kill this year, without a doubt, which he even had some looks last year. So that's a good. I think he had 4 shorthanded goals last year, 3 or 4. My memory is. I was working on remembering stuff for the start of the season, and then being out of town last weekend kind of put some of that to the back of my memory. So maybe if you've got it pulled up, but it was like 3 or 4 shorthanded goals last year for Newen. But what can he do when he can get set up in the offensive zone? Can we see that wrist shot maybe start to fool goaltenders a little bit? But Newen is going to be another one of those guys who, can he take a jump from 23 goals? Can he get to 25 to 30? Maybe can he get to 40? We'll see. He's got a goal a game right now. But very small sample size with that. So, when you're looking at Portland's roster and you're looking at their top 6, it's full of 19s and 20s, which in a way is what you want. But at the same time, they're going to rely on those guys pretty heavily.
Yeah. I don't think I'd really thought about the 320s being all up front this year and being guys with, well-established, records of success in our league. And, I know you've been following the careers of James Steffen and Jack O'Brien since they were in Bantam.
Yep.
And also they've been playing together this whole time. It would be interesting to see if they finally end up on the same line, but they're done trying to break those tendencies or whatever. But yeah, it's there should be goals, and there should be quite a few of them. That's for sure.
Yep.
And you mentioned Newen, and a player that I've always really liked the timing of his goals as much as the quantity. It seems like
yep.
Whenever they need. To change the tide of momentum or the run of play, or it seems like the timing of his goals is always like, to where you think he scored 50, and then until you go back and look or something, because it seems like
yep.
he's scoring like they're memorable goals, because of the impact of them, and that's something I've always really liked about that player, and he could throw in a couple goals that they don't mean as much either if he wants, that's fine with me, but
right.
But yeah, it's and that's obviously anecdotal. It's not anything I can point to, but it just seems that way. You know what I mean?
Yep. Yeah, and Newen is the type of player who I think especially his 17-year-old year, you really got a chance for him to. I think his speed caught other teams off guard. Last year, there was still, especially the teams out east and from the Central, who didn't see him as much, and to a certain extent, some of the BC teams, would maybe kind of underestimate that speed. But the book's out on Newen now, but you still got to be able to stop it. But he's the type of guy where if the defense doesn't have the right gap control, he's going to burn him for a breakaway. And we've already seen him with the breakaway goal in Kelowna, off just a great heads up play by Luke Brunin, and just being able to kind of finish on those plays. We've seen him kind of take Jaden DeRoe's move a little bit, which is kind of that forehand backhand for Newen a little bit. And but yeah, it's I think last year there was some concerns about, is this team going to be able to score enough and where are the goals going to come from. This year you kind of know where the goals are going to come from, and you kind of hope that they stay consistent that way, and it can continue to be a scoring by committee approach. They still don't have a Jarvis or a Glass, a Stankoven, even a Zellweger to a certain extent. Cagnoni is maybe the closest they have to that, but they don't have that top-end NHL-ready style player, kind of the guy, if you will, like Lucius was for those 6 games of that was kind of your ringer that you had. But what that's going to do is it's going to give Portland this ability to just roll lines, and that there's not going to be a huge drop off from line 1 to line 3, and especially once they get healthy with Miller and McDonough coming back. I think there's a lot of skill that bottom 6 is going to have. We barely touched on Diego Bottazzoni and what we've seen out of him. Josh Critzer into his draft eligible season as a late birthday last year. I know had a really strong training camp, maybe a little bit disappointed in maybe his preseason, but that's not to say that it wasn't good. It's just he was maybe hoping for a little bit more out of that, and that's saying something because I think he still had 4 goals or something like that. But he just, I think he wasn't quite satisfied, which is probably something that you want. But Zakreski is. And Bottazzoni and Shelter, we talked a little bit about Shelter, but those guys are kind of in that next mixture of groups, and that's where you really can start to see the advantage that Portland's going to have. We saw that in their playoff series against Everett, where Everett kind of had one line. They had Berezowski and Roost, and to a certain extent they were hamstrung with some injuries up front, but they were a one-line team for the most part. Kamloops could roll a couple more lines, but that's how Portland was able to beat these teams, and Seattle was maybe the king of it, of just wave after wave after wave. There's no break, and I don't think any team's going to have the NHL style of players like that. That I'm not comparing this year's Portland team to last year's Seattle teams by any means, but it's they're going to be able to keep that style going, and there's not going to be a big drop off. And when another team has got their kind of shut down defensive pair, which group do you put that out against? It's not as simple as, okay, well, when Stankoven's on the ice or when Brad Lambert's on the ice, we're gonna put this guy out there. When Bedard's out there, okay, here's our shutdown guys. It's like, okay, well, do you try and stop, Stefan and Clausen? Okay, well, now all of a sudden, what are you going to do when you got Davies and O'Brien on the next line? And then you start putting these combos together and you start rotating these lines, and Portland's going to have a lot of mismatches, and it's going to be up to some of these younger guys to take advantage of those situations that some of the older guys are going to afford them.
Yeah, and that's one thing they've done a really good job over the last few years is spread it out across the top three lines basically, and so which one is the top line, and no one really knows. I mean, it's going to vary night to night, and it seems like it hasn't hurt them to do that. That they've got away with it, which is always a luxury, especially for bringing guys along. I mean, you mentioned Bottazzoni, and so if you were on last year's Kamloops team or Seattle team or whatever, like a 17-year-old isn't getting much. Whereas you need that for the future, and so if you can sprinkle him in one of the top lines, and because you can play one of these guys on the lower line because they've kind of mixed and matched. I mean, that seems to be advantageous if you can still put the puck in the net, and again, it's worked for him, and it should continue to work. You'd think.
You would think, yeah, absolutely, and you got a guy like Bottazzoni who last year didn't, it took him a while before he got his first goal, and I think that was eating away at him a little bit. He's been a guy who's always scored in his career, and it kind of took him a while to kind of get that first one to go, and you think this year with him, just that absolute of a snipe of a shot that he had for his goal, saying something, that goal that he had, to beat Hauser, who's maybe one of the best goalies in the league this year, with Milic and Suhanek out, assuming both don't come back. It's not looking likely at this moment, but Hauser's a real good goalie for Wenatchee, and the shot that Bottazzoni put on him was impressive. And Bottazzoni is just the guy who's got tree trunks for legs. He's got a lot of lower body strength. You kind of look for him to fill out a little bit, but he's just sitting there and he's primed for a breakout season. I think as the scouts and some of these central scouting ratings come out, you'll start to see a player like Bottazzoni start to pop off the page a little bit. It's good to see him get some power play time before some of the other veterans come back. But he's a player who, if he's on that third line again, because you've got the three overage forwards, and then you've got then you throw in Chizowski, and Newen and Davies as kind of your top six, if you will, if you wanted to go with that combination. Well, now you've got Buttazzoni on the third line, and that is a matchup nightmare. And I think Buttazzoni's going to be licking his chops when he's got that, if he gets those kind of third pair matchups, and he can be sitting on a really big season, can be an X factor. But also, as we saw, he doesn't look one bit out of place in the top six when he was playing, in those first two lines last weekend.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cop out for me, but when I was at Neely Cup and watching, these players that we know, the Buttazzonis and the Chizowskis and who's the other guy I'm thinking of, Zakreski, to name a guy in particular that, when I've been enough of these things that you see the guy the year prior and then come back into camp and he's a little bigger, a little faster, a little stronger, a little more experienced, and it shows. And so, you like to see, obviously that's the whole name of junior hockey, is that you climb the ladder for the 2, 3, 4 years you're in this league. And I say it's a cop out because I feel like the expected improvements, at least in a small sample size, and again in the August scrimmage, but I feel like these guys have moved along as expected, which is what you're trying to do. It's what you want. I mean, and yep. So to see him again in live fire, here in the next several months, it'll be nice. But I'm optimistic. I mean, I'm optimistic about all the guys. I mean, that's just kind of how it works. Like, I expect you to be better until you're not. So it's. So we'll see, but yeah, I'm high on all these guys until you prove me otherwise. That's probably how I want to phrase it.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And there's kind of that natural expectation that you are a year older, and you've just got another off season using Rich Campbell's conditioning and workout plans that are specific for each individual guy. And you start to see, as they work with different trainers and skating coaches and skills coaches, and just talking to some of these guys about their summers of some guys in the gym multiple times a day, on the ice multiple times a day. And it's almost like in a way they worked harder during the off season than they did during the season, just trying to put on weight and get just a little bit faster. Can they get just that extra edge that they need? And, so I think in that situation with some of those guys like Zakreski, who I know took his off season very seriously, and was able to kind of call on some people to help him with that, that's exactly what you want to see. And you want to see these guys building good habits, both from a hockey perspective, but also just in life of, being a hard worker and being committed to your craft and doing what it takes to reach that next level, whether it be in the world, the corporate world, or whatever else these guys may want to do, of just how do I become the best that I can be and kind of show off my skill set and who I am as a person to the best of their ability.
So we touched earlier about how, the peak of the cycle was intended to be this year for some time, really. I mean, since that we talked about that group of 17-year-old defensemen who are now 19s and this group of 20-year-old forwards, and I again, you have your finger on the pulse better than all the rest of us, but it feels like they made the decision and goal at the end of the season and in the playoffs almost as much as an investment in this year as anything. And it was benched a very popular goalie in Giannuzzi to give Spoonar the playoff experience as the goalie of the future, and all of a sudden the future is now. I mean, what can we expect out of the recently returned from pro camp, Jan Spoonar?
It's funny you mentioned that. I talked to him today, and he's still working on his English and all that. But I asked him, how does it feel to be going into the season as the number one? And he's like, I'm not a number one goalie. I'm not the number one goalie. I'm just here to play and stop some pucks if I can, and loosely translated, but also kind of paraphrasing it a little bit. And I was able to talk with Marcus. I talked with Marcus Newen off record, but I did an on record thing with Mark Ulster, and apparently those two just blended together. But just how Ulster was just saying how ready Jan is to take the net, and he's gotten that opportunity to see what pressure situations are like. He's like being in Montreal and you're a goalie and you can't help but think of Carey Price. And while he's not necessarily there, you're also like, I'm in the home of Carey Price. Like, this is just kind of one of those situations. And, so I think Jan towards the end of last year started to see more ice time, which is either here nor there, depending upon your view of things from last year. But, with Spoonar this year, I think you're likely to see him take on a heavy role. And, it's Luke Brunen's draft year. He won out the backup goaltending spot against Justin March, who's going to go back and play in the Saskatchewan Junior Hockey League and Junior A. And can obviously come back and forth between Portland as they need him to, especially if Spoonar makes Czech's World Junior roster. They'll need March to step back in. But I think you don't know what you have in your backup goaltenders for sure. So that's going to be a question mark. But, for Jan and Spoonar, and what you see from him is just, can he take that calm demeanor that he has and keep it going on the ice? And, he's looking to try and get a pro contract, and he got the taste of it with Montreal. I think he was at Edmonton's camp last year. Edmonton Oilers, that is, with their camp last year. And so he's gotten to kind of see it, get a little closer to it. And, I think, having him back there will be important. Jan is the kind of goalie, though, who likes to feel the puck. And their Portland goalies can sometimes go long stretches without facing a lot of shots. And then when they face a shot, it's a breakaway opportunity, or it's a shorthanded rush coming the other way, or it's 2-on-1s, or they're grade A chances, and that's really tough for a goalie. And I think Januzzi got the short end of that stick several times last year, both from a fan perspective and just other situations of what he had to deal with. So we'll see how Jan takes that this year, or Spoonar handles that as kind of the primary guy, but he's not going to be. He's not going to be all over the place. I think if you see in Spoonar making these diving saves and these super acrobatic saves, that's probably not what you want. I know Burke, the goalie coach who's been working with him, has been talking to him. There's nothing wrong with the puck hitting you in the chest. It's not a flashy save. You're not gonna end up on highlight of the night that the WHL puts out, but you're gonna do your team a lot of good. And I think for him, kind of one of the other things that kind of is under the radar a little bit for goalies is, to a certain extent, they have to be a game manager of knowing when to play the puck, when to get a whistle. Can they snag with their glove, or deflect a shot with their blocker that's maybe going wide and put it into the netting, or freeze it for a whistle if they've got guys out there that are tired, kind of like we were talking about before with kind of getting hemmed in their own zone. So that's an area I keep an eye on as well, is how does Spoonar handle kind of the game management side, and another year of being able to communicate with these guys. There's so many factors that go into it, and how fast you have to be able to make decisions. And Spoonar is getting better with his English. He's got a couple of English tutors that are helping him as well. I know Ulster's helping him with his English. The media side, we're trying to do what we can to try and get him comfortable talking and things like that as well. But I think it's a big year for Spoonar. He's a 19-year-old now. There's a lot of eyes on him to see how he can kind of take his game to that next level.
And it's, minutia, but, you mentioned new goalie coach Brendan Burke, who, won the league championship in a Portland sweater, a number of years ago, and replacing, after the retirement of Stanley Cup winner, the Edmonton Oilers goalie Andy Moog, who I know you have a personal relationship with over time, but And so that's I mean, you still have a championship pedigree in a different league and a different trophy, but a different sweater, and a sweater very familiar to Portland fans as far as new goalie coach in town, which is fun. And
it's a different style, right? Andy Moog's style is very different than Brendan Burke's style, right? And we were talking a little bit about coaches. I think Mike Johnson is 66. I don't know, Gustafson's in his, I think, 40s, maybe 50s. Hope I'm not eating crow on this one, but there's just older coaches, and Andy Moog, like you mentioned, retired. And for some, I mean, these are kids, these are teenagers, and Brendan Burke is a little bit closer in that age. Obviously, you're not going to have necessarily a 22-year-old or 24-year-old coaching these guys, but I'm not saying that by any means. But when you got a guy like Brendan Burke who can maybe connect in a way differently, and Burke is here, I think, full-time, where Andy Moog was only in on a part-time basis. So I think that's going to really help from a goaltending standpoint, to just have someone who can go over video and can be solely helping them at practices and things like that. I think that's going to go a long way for Spoonar and for Brunin. And then March when he's here. But, that's another factor that I think that is kind of behind the scenes, that you might start to see a difference as goalies get a little bit more coaching and a little more dedicated time given to them.
Yeah, I didn't know that about having a full-time goalie coach. I believe that's, to my knowledge, and I'm not in the weeds like a guy like yourself, but to my knowledge, that's the first time they've had a full-time goalie coach. And I've always, it's not my money to spend, but I've always thought that they should. That I mean, that's kind of,
yep.
I mean, goaltending is so unique that it's hard for a regular coach to relate, and so that's why they have their own coach in the first place. And a weekend here and there, like I've always wondered if that's enough, and I like that the organization is apparently stable enough that they can bring in a guy full time, and again, a guy that knows what it's like to play in this town and live here as well. So a guy that's very experienced with Winterhawks hockey. So that I like that idea all the way around.
Yeah, and the Winterhawks practices, I realize not a lot of fans get the opportunity to see those, but let me tell you, they are intense practices, and they go hard from the moment they're on the ice to the moment they're off the ice. They are battling, they are competing, they've got their little scoring system that they do, and the losing team at the end of a drill or at the end of practice overall has to skate, take a couple extra laps. So it's a competitive environment, and what that also means for the goalies is that they're just, some of these drills, I just feel from them. I'm like, oh, here comes another 3-on-0 rush. Here comes another 2-on-0 rush. Oh, okay, they got breakaways, or okay, they're just doing these small area games and the battling that these goalies that they're trying to simulate as best they can for the goalies as well. But I feel like sometimes the way the Portland's practices are geared isn't always the most beneficial use, if I can say, of being a novice eye myself and not part of hockey ops. But you go, okay, how much did the goalie get out of today's practice versus a forward or a defenseman? And so then when you can see Brendan Burke out there, who, when they're maybe working on line drills or pivots or shoulder checks or different things, who can be out there, who can be talking with the goalies and working on glove positioning or angling of the blocker or their stick or their angles and their T pushes or whatever else it might be. That's such a more valuable use of that practice time for these goalies. And so I think that's where you'll really start to maybe see a development as well that may be harder to see on the actual ice during the 68 regular season games. But that's something that I know that Jan was saying today, and just like, he's become my best friend, as he said of Burke, of like, I talk to him every day, multiple times a day, and just ask him questions, and he'll send me a quick little video. Again, I'm paraphrasing. I'm a man of many words. Jan is not. So kind of comparing him a little bit, but that was just I just think that's going to do wonders for a guy like Spoonar and Brunin as well.
I mean, when Nino Niederreiter is here, he says, "I shoot the puck go in," and that was, yep. And I didn't need him to say anything else, and so,
yeah.
Yeah, see the puck, stop the puck. Great. Nice talking to you, kid.
Yeah, exactly. And, I think you're starting to see a little bit of his personality come out, which is always nice of just, but yeah, he's shy, he's a little timid, but that he's also got that fiery edge of when a puck gets by him, even in practice, it's like, okay, you can tell it riles him up and he wants to stop that next one that comes at him, which is for a goalie, it's kind of is this the latest we've gone without a football reference into one of our shows with you and me? Like a cornerback, you got to have a short memory, and I think Spooner's got that trait that you're looking for there.
Or you got to shake it off. Yeah,
I see what you. Okay, there's the Kansas City reference.
Technically a football reference.
Yeah, that's true. Your Chiefs went from never in the news to always in the news over the course of a couple seasons.
It's a weird time to be alive, Josh. Or a great time to be alive. I should specify.
Yeah, there you go.
Weird world. I had mixed metaphors there, but yeah. When I was watching football, Pat Mahomes, the best player in the game, was the second most famous person in the building.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is weird, but yes.
It's not often that Patrick Mahomes is playing second fiddle, but sure enough, and on that day he was, and maybe this coming Sunday he will as well.
Yeah.
That I saw. I don't know. You can't hide from it, and like at the end of practice today, I was doing a couple of the interviews, and I heard Taylor Swift blasting from the locker room. I was like, okay, that checks out. Like, yeah. I'm here for it. Let's go. Like, all right. But yeah, you can't hide from it.
Yeah, that's a world I know nothing about, but I suspect that's going to change. So I don't know. But
yeah. Yeah. Yep.
So, we talked about it off air, but we didn't want to do a lot of breaking down goals from the first weekend or necessarily previewing the weekend we're coming into, being how, this is Thursday and people aren't, as we tape Thursday evening, we're not going to have a lot of time to listen for the Friday game, but next week when the home schedule starts, and there's, I believe, 5 consecutive home games start the year?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
For fans making their way to the Glass Palace, we are still, I believe anyway, to peel the curtain back, I haven't verified that we're still friends with the guys down at Cartside, but what's the hair club? I'm a member and the president. Like, it's a place that I go, and it's a nice setup, and I would encourage you to go to Cartside one way or the other, but don't tell them you listen to WHL Unfiltered. I've seen people try that, and it does not work. They don't know that show. They look at you like you're from Mars. You tell them you listen to Pucklandia. I want you to listen to Unfiltered, but that's not the point of this discussion. You listen to Pucklandia, and you will get the happy hour price. So, and it's a nice perk, and so I try to do that for listeners of the show. So, let's see, who we playing? The Everett Silvertips, yes.
Yep.
On Friday the 7th, I believe it is.
6th is the first game.
Same difference. Whatever the Friday is.
Yeah, it's a Friday game. Yeah, 6th on the calendar, Friday on the day. Yep. So
and everybody, nobody likes the Silvertips, and you want to come down and watch a hockey game. Obviously, I mean, this show never sells tickets. Like, people listen to Pucklandia are already invested, but I want to extend the offer once again this season to our friends down at Cartside, but. Yeah, and where are we reading your work at, Josh?
Yeah, still kicking at pnwhockeytalk.com. I brought on Kurt this year, who Portland fans are. If you're on social media and Twitter or X or whatever that platform's called these days, you're probably familiar with Kurt. But yeah, he's joined the fold this year, and he's going to be helping out cover the Winter Hawks as my work schedule gets a little busier, and just trying to expand the coverage a little bit, so you'll be able to hear from him as well. I'd imagine he'll probably make an appearance or two throughout the season on your show. But yeah, you'll be able to read both him and my work. I know he's got an article that's in the works a little bit right now on Nicholas Johnson. I've got a couple in the works as well. But yeah, pnwhockeytalk.com. We try really hard to provide an ad-free experience. We've got a couple of contributors and sponsors that have tried to make that a reality again this year. So always thankful to those guys who help us out, kind of like for you with Cartside. For me, Rallison Sellers, or Jay Rallison Sellers now these days, like he's been with me from day one, and he helps keep the lights on over there, and allows me to continue to do what I do. So stuff like that is just it's huge. But yeah. And then on Twitter or X or whatever I'm supposed to call it, I'm not the best with some of that, but it's JJ Critzer. But yeah, JJ Critzer on social media.
Downtown Sherwood there for Jay Rallison?
Yeah, yep. He's got a tasting room in downtown Sherwood. And if you mention PNW Hockey Talk or the Winterhawks, he'll give you a 2-for-1 tasting, which is really nice. But yeah, he's just a local owner. Makes his own wine, does a couple thousand cases a year, and so boutique style wines. He specializes in quality over quantity. But yeah, just great wines, both red and whites. Depending upon what you like, he's got something for you. So let him know that we told you to stop by, and he'll treat you well. But yeah, but if nothing else, just want to just say a thank you to him. And I was just up at the winery last night, and we were talking. He's excited about the Winterhawks season. Doesn't know a lot about it, but knows enough that hey, go Hawks, right? It's kind of what he said as I was leaving, and I'm like, I'm a media guy, so I'll. Sure. But yeah, absolutely. It's one of those where he's happy to be on board to kind of support PNW Hockey Talk again this year.
Yeah. As quasi media, I don't know where I stand, but yeah. But I stand when they score, so I guess there's that. But
yeah,
we should.
You're operating a show called Pucklandia. It's a little bit different than. Yeah. But,
it is. Yeah. I am not credentialed. I pay money to get in the door, but
there you go. And that's the difference. So yeah.
But
I'm fortunate enough to hold again. I got a WHL media pass, so I'm doing something right, or a CHL media pass this year. Second year that I've had a CHL media pass. Not that I'm gonna get out to the OHL or the Q this year, but I'm again I appreciate the league and the teams and the Winterhawks organization for trusting me and giving me those credentials, so that way we can help tell some of these stories of all the work these players are doing, because without the teams and the league and Dick Merrick, who's out on paternity leave, who I think he'll be back in time for the home opener, it sounds like, might be, don't quote me on that, don't hold me to that, but Peter Dewar, who's doing a really good job filling in for Nick on kind of behind the scenes and running social media and stuff there, just providing the access that they do. So big thank you to him and Jeff McGillis and all of his staff. So, it helps us be able to put these shows together and get players and coaches and all that stuff and try and, tell the stories that's going on about these teams more so than, just what you're seeing on the box score online.
Right. I guess for the first time, I hadn't really thought about this for this second, but for the first time in my life, I'm happy that we don't have a good paternity leave in this country, because then we get Merrick back.
Yeah, I mean,
typically I would argue for more parental leave, but not if it's this guy, because we need him.
Right.
So
yeah, Nick does a great job, and Andy Kemper's filled in great for him. The first 2 games, and it's always fun hearing Andy on the call, and all those different things. He'll be on the call again up in Seattle. I think his daughter will be with him, which is always a fun experience, I imagine, for Andy. So I think that'll be a cool time for them as a family. But yeah, to have Nick back behind the mic and have the enter into parenthood now for him and his wife and all that. I think he was still able to get a good amount of time off. I think he was off for a little over a month, maybe a little bit longer, I think. But yeah, it's not quite what some other people have, but I think it's more than, he didn't miss 3 days and was right back to work. So he's been taken care of that, at least from that standpoint.
Yeah, we'll have to have him on the show and give him a formal congratulations on the new addition to his life. But you mentioned, Andy Kemper and his daughter, and I can't remember what positive you used, but it's nice to have her in Kent. And I'm like, I'm not sure it's nice to have anyone in Kent exactly, but
yeah.
But at the same time, I miss the hostility, and I'm sure at some point here in the not distant future, I will also be in Kent. So we'll see how that goes.
Go.
But
yep.
All right. Well, I really appreciate your time, Josh, and we will have to utilize your coverage over the course of the year and see where this team takes us. But it should be a fun year with a lot of goals. So I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Thanks as always for having me on, Chad. If you're, hope to see all of you around the rink. Come say hi if you want, or not. I also get that too. So, but yeah, as always, appreciate everything you do, Chad, to keeping these shows alive and all that. So, always a pleasure being the house band that can come on when you need it.
All right. Thanks, Josh.
See you, Chad.